The gospel has been God's initiative from beginning to end. So see why I said that. Let's read Acts chapter 10, verse 36. That place says, "This is the message of good news for the people of Israel, that there is peace with God through Jesus Christ, who is Lord of all." This particular verse occurred when Peter visited the house of Cornelius. So at this point, it was a turning point for the early church. So Cornelius was a Gentile and Peter was a Jew. So Peter received a message or a revelation from God that the gospel is not only meant for the Jews but for all the people. So in this verse, Peter just summarized the core message of the gospel. He says that the good news first came to Israel, but its blessing is not limited to Israel. So God was announcing peace, not political peace, but reconciliation between sinful humanity and himself through Jesus Christ. In other words, it means that the message God sent, like we read in John 3:16, God so loved the world that he sent. And in verse 17, it says, "For God sent not his son to condemn the world." So mark the word sent. It means that salvation begins with God. Humanity did not negotiate peace. God proclaimed it. Man did not beg God. It's always been God. It's always been his desire from the beginning to reconcile man to himself. So the next one I want to talk about is peace with God. This is very, very important because it is through Jesus Christ that we have peace with God. And peace in this context means restored relationship. Sin created separation between man and God. But through Christ's death and resurrection, the hostility that existed between man and God has been removed. Just as Romans chapter 5 verse 1 says, "For therefore, since we have been made right in God's sight by faith, we have peace with God because of what Jesus our Lord has done." So it is not earned by our works or by law, but it is granted to us through Jesus. Remember, the emphasis has been Jesus. He is the reason why we have everything we have in God. So, and the last part of this verse says, "And Jesus is Lord over all." What is this emphasizing? Peter is boldly declaring that Jesus is not only Messiah of Israel, but Lord over Jews and Gentiles alike. In other words, his authority is universal. So this verse is announcing that through Jesus Christ, God has provided reconciliation for all people, and Christ reigns as Lord over everyone. So the question is, are you willing to receive what God has provided through his son Jesus Christ?